Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa, where only the strongest roots see the light. Brought to you by Botánica Candles and More. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please tap that like button and hit that subscribe button. We have a wonderful episode planned for you today. But before we delve into that, we definitely want to show our love to all of our membership program members, starting off with our supporter level, Mr. Max T, Miss Nicole XO, and Miss 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃. Apart from that, we have our premium superfan level, which includes Punkin Maddox, Kenya Hutton, All the Difference 2012, and then our VIP members, Noble, Laja Rocks, Queen Liquidators B, Box Chevy Champ, Donna Moon Goddess, Robert Cifuentes Jr., Exhibit ANY, Street Tuber. We have Aishani Bush, and we have 𝗿𝗲𝗃𝗃𝗃. Guys, thank you so much for being a part of our family as we continue to grow. And for everybody that is not a part that wants to be shouted out on an episode, please definitely tap on that link to become a part of our membership program. Thank you so much, growing by the day. Today's episode, Ifa and Ayan. Definitely an episode that I'm very excited about because it's an instrument and energy that has intrigued me since I was a young boy in Hialeah. And today I feel very humbled and very excited because we have a guest who has literally dedicated their life to this music, African percussion, etc. An academician, a real student of the science, I'll say, a real son of the science. And I want you guys to join me in welcoming Mr. Michael Spiro Bata. Mike, are you there?
I am here. I wasn't quite sure about the delay, but I'm here and I hear you fine.
Oh my God, my friend, it's such a pleasure to have you on. We want to say thank you so much, and really excited to talk about Ayan because such a beautiful music and such a beautiful art form, and to have somebody such as yourself who's dedicated so much time to this culture and this instrument, we're really excited and want to thank you.
My honor. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. So before we get into all the fun stuff of smacking the skins and ringing the bells, we kind of want to get into your backstory, right? So can you kind of let us know where you're from and what your background is?
Yeah, I'm a gringo, pure and pure. I'm a white guy born in St. Louis, Missouri, and because of where I lived as a kid, I grew up actually on Motown. I'm a James Brown, Temptations, Joe Tex, Otis Redding,
nice,
Aretha. That's my adolescence, so I knew nothing of Afro Cuban music or La Música Latina. I didn't know anything about it. I'm not sure that I do today, but maybe I know a little bit more about it today than when I was a kid. And then one thing kind of led to another, and I decided one day that I was going to quit college and learn to play drums. And I looked around, and everybody was a drum set player. And I thought, well, why don't I get some conga drums and be a little different than everybody else? And my dream would have been to play congas for Aretha or for the Four Tops or James Brown. And then in the process so I got a couple of conga drums and realized that I had no idea how to play them. Didn't know anything really about them, and that led me to start looking for teachers and studying, and that then led to this complete left turn in my life. So that's kind of the backstory for me.
I tell you, when we first spoke, it was very refreshing because you revealed to me that you're of Hungarian descent like me, and I thought it was so ironic because you don't meet a lot of us here. Like even with the Sicilian thing, like people are like, whoa, but you know, to actually see somebody else in this from, you know, our Eastern Bloc was really refreshing. And then apart from that, the music you're mentioning, it resonates so much with me because my grandmother was a huge Motown girl. My mother has had me listening to all of the names you mentioned since I was a young man. And it's interesting because even when I sing Orisha music, and maybe this happens to you when you play the drum, they're like, man, you sing with a lot of soul, you know? So I'm not sure if that happens to you. Maybe with your Bata style, you know, people kind of look at you like, oh, where'd you get that from? You know, that flavor. So, you know, does that happen at
Yeah,
all?
well, it happens, but you know, I don't necessarily associate it with my love for Motown per se as much as I don't think that if you play music for the Orisha, um, uh, you know, as a full component of your life, and you don't bring your okokan, you don't bring your emotion, you don't bring your corazon, your heart. I don't know how you could sing or play. So I don't associate it per se with my love for Motown as much as if you don't play music with passion, any music with passion, yeah, I don't know how you play music, and let alone Orisha music. If you don't have passion for that when you play or sing, I don't see how you could even do it.
And that makes a lot of sense because when, you know, the little bit that I've been able to understand about percussion in general, or even African percussion, is it resonates with the heartbeat. You know, from what I understand, that's where these rhythms really derive from, you know, and that's why they're so in unison. So that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I remember when you told me you were going to be on tour for this interview, and, you know, we appreciate your time once again so much. You know, could you let our viewers know about some of your academic credentials, you know, as so they can have an idea of it moving forward?
Yeah, okay. You know, I, I, I don't, um, I don't spend a lot of time. Well, it's interesting dwelling on it because, in fact, I only have a bachelor's degree. Um,
Nice.
I I went to graduate school years ago for 3.5 years actually, but I quit. It's interesting. I, I I quit because I wanted to learn to play bata, and in order to do that, I had to leave the city that I was in graduate school in,
Wow.
and I never went back. Uh, but I had uh, throughout my adult life, I had gotten gigs teaching at different universities and then being a guest artist at a lot of different universities, actually hundreds of them. Um, as it turned out, I was a guest artist all over the United States and in Europe and in Latin America and a lot of places. Um, and then in 2008, I got a job at Indiana University um, in the percussion and jazz departments, and then they gave me tenure, and so I was an associate professor of both jazz and percussion um, at Indiana University until I retired at the end of 2018. So even though officially I only have a bachelor's degree, at one point in my life, I guess you could say I was a serious academician, I guess you could say.
Well, you did much better than me. I dropped out before my sophomore year, so you're an inspiration. To me, you're an absolute inspiration, Baba. You know. So you mentioned you have this run in with the congas, right? You're interested in them. You're looking for teachers. You're delving into the conga, I'm sure. When did you first hear Bata? How did that come about?
Um, let's see, my conga drum teacher, I wanted to learn, exposed me to la música folclórica, you know, rumba, eh, bembe, güiro, yesa. Although exposed is a tricky word because back then, this would be like mid 1970s, there weren't a lot of things, you know, opportunities to be exposed to. But and then one day gave me a record to take home called Tambores Bata, which was a famous Bata record from way back in the day by Gerardo Rodriguez, who was one of the disciples of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, Pablo Roche,
Oh, wow.
and played with Pablo and Raúl Díaz, better known as Nasaco, and Trinidad Teregrosa, who was a famous osainista
Oh, yeah.
back in the day. And Gerardo was a part of that equipo, part of that crew. And he made a record that called Tambores Bata that my teacher gave me. And it was just kind of mind-boggling to me how beautiful it was, even though I didn't really know what it was or anything about it. And then I saw my teacher play, not at a ceremony, this was again back in the 1970s, with his two guys at a like a salsa concert, and they opened the concert by playing bata drums for like 5 minutes or something, you know, just a little bit, and I just went, okay, I don't know anything, I don't know what this is, I don't know nothing, but that's what I want to do.
Wow.
And like one of those love at first sight kind of things. And that sounds kind of cliched. Not kind of, it sounds cliched, but it was the truth. It literally, I fell in love with it and knew then and there that if I ever could, that's what I would learn to do. And it's now, what, 50 years later, and
Wow.
I'm still in love with it.
I tell you, Mike, I resonate with that so much because I remember the first time I heard somebody doing a bow on my block in Hialeah when I was a young boy, or the first time I heard even, you know, somebody, like, you see the 𝗶𝗏𝗏𝗏s, they're walking around, you know, they got the big bracelets on, and you hear the 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, and you're like, I don't know what that is, but I want that, and I resonate with you, brother. And it's interesting because 𝗏𝗏𝗏 does as well, because there's actually a pataki in the Odu of 𝘃𝗶𝗏𝗏𝗏 that speaks of when there was a young boy who was walking, and he heard the bata drums, and he had no idea what it was that he was hearing, right? But he just kept going closer and closer and closer to the call until he encountered, obviously, the three. And it really is what you just mentioned, you know, that I don't know what this is, what we're doing, but I want to be a part of it. So it's really incredible that that's kind of actually what happened, because 𝗏𝗏𝗏 is constantly, you know, reliving itself. So I'm not sure if you mentioned him previously, but could you mention your teacher's name again? I think it escaped me.
Yes. Yeah, his name, this was my first teacher. I've had many. Well, I should say several, not many. And his name is Marcus Gordon. Marcus Gordon was originally from New York and was one of the first Americans to play bata in the United States ever, back in New York.
Wow.
And then he moved to San Francisco, Omo Batala, and was single-handedly responsible for an enormous amount of Caribbean culture that ended up, or I should say, because the Brazilian culture isn't Caribbean, but right, but Latin and Brazilian and Caribbean culture in the San Francisco Bay Area. He, along with a couple of other people, started the whole Carnaval celebration that now has been going on in San Francisco for, 50 years or whatever. He is Obatala made now for probably 45 years, something like
Good
that,
Lord.
I'm guessing.
Jeez.
And really a really important figure in San Francisco Bay Area cultural existence and growth. So Marcus was my first folkloric teacher, if you will. I had a conga drum teacher before him named Kenneth Nash, who was very well known back in the day, a jazz conga player, African-American conga player, who told me to go to Marcus because he had started to expose me to Afro-Cuban music. And he told me, I'm an African-American, I don't really play that music. If you want to learn that, you need to go see this guy, Marcus Gordon. So Kenneth recommended me to Marcus, and Marcus was my teacher for many, many years, and then, but wouldn't teach me Bata because at that time it was a secret. And nobody would teach it. Cubanos wouldn't teach it. The few Americans that knew anything about it wouldn't teach it. And so I was in graduate school in Seattle a few years later, and he called me on the phone and said, well, I'm going to teach Bata. If you want to learn, you're welcome. And I left Seattle and moved to San Francisco and never left.
That's incredible. I tell you, just to feel the call and have so much certainty about what you wanted to do and just go with it. And it really is a risk, you know, whenever you, especially in something like this where it's so unregulated, where it's so foreign to people such as us who are born in this country. You know, even if you're from a place even like Miami, there were times when I didn't know religion was happening around me, you know, because if you're not trained to it, you don't know what's really occurring. So you take this epic leap of faith, you follow this man to the Bay, and you start learning this this instrument, right? What ultimately led you to the point where you're like, well, now I'm going to get initiated into this?
Well, so Marcus got really busy, and he sort of handed me off to a gentleman named Harold Muniz, a Puerto Rican guy. And Harold Muniz and me and a guy you may have heard of, his name is John Santos.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so John, very well known Latin musician. We all played in a band together called the Orquesta Batachanga.
Nice.
And we were incorporating all kinds of folkloric music into the charanga tradition. We were playing sort of contemporary Cuban charanga, but then we would put what Bata we knew in it, Guaguancó, Güiro, different things. And at that time, my next mentor, if you will, was a very famous and profound drummer by the name of Francisco 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍𝗃.
Oh, yeah.
And Francisco 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍 lived in the Bay Area, and he played in a nightclub 4 nights a week. And every now and then he would come hear our band, and he would be very complimentary, which was not his nature. And, oh, you guys play good, man. You guys play good. No, you got to keep playing. But he would never, like, you know, that would be it. And then one day he came to our gig and he said, I got to talk to you guys. And he met us after the gig and he said, I'm bringing a set of fundamento from Matanzas because 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍𝗃 was a matancero.
Wow.
And arguably the most famous matancero, certainly in the history of the U.S. And I need 3 guys to play it with me, and I want to know if you guys will do it. And John and Harold had already been sworn, already were jurado by a Cuban gentleman by the name of Alfredo Coyude, Alfredo Vido, but I was not. And so I was but you can't play fundamento if you're not sworn.
Of course.
So Marcus had put aleques on me and given me my warriors, but I did not yet have my mano de orunla, and I was not yet sworn to Ayan. So Francisco swore me to the drum, and then I went to New York and received my mano de orunla from Julito Collazo, who was my godfather then, of course, in Ifa. And that began my fundamental life.
And where did actually your swearing in of Ayan occur, brother?
Los Angeles, because Francisco, shortly after we started to play fundamental, moved from San Francisco to LA. So we used to commute to LA from San Francisco. But keep in mind, I put the word commute in quotes because even then it was a 6-hour drive.
Oh, wow.
And now it's an 8-hour drive. So we paid our dues, brother.
And so much respect for that, because you see what you guys had to do to be able to get to a level of proficiency. It's really commendable. You know, even within Ifa now, my generation, we're very privileged, you know, because even though you can never replace an excellent mentor, guide, and elder, there's so much at our fingertips. And I think that's a big issue now, is that, you know, we really can't replace that due process, because it builds a strength and character to where you really appreciate what it is that you're doing, that you see so characteristic of your generation. And you know, it's very key, and to maintain that, you know, by way of people hearing you talk about it is very important for, you know, us continuing this tradition.
You know, I think all of the discussions that we all have in any walk of life about technology and the internet and digital technology, and I think we need and should have a lot of discussions and I'm trying to find the right word, but sort of investigaciones, you know, about, there are great things about technology, there are bad things about technology, and how that impacts our tradition, our religion, our music, Odu, all of it. You know, it's a very complex issue. It's not simple, and I don't think it's all bad, but I don't think it's all good. I think there's a lot to be, you know, unpacked and all that. So yeah, it's a new era.
Sure. And so now you're in the thick of the juramento, right? So obviously, without going into details about the ceremony, what are the emotions that you're going through? Like, oh my God, I'm here. You know, what was that like?
Yeah. Well, obviously, the thing that I want to say I can't say because it sort of gives away part of the ceremony.
Sure.
I'll just well, I think it's fair. It's not a secret to say it's a trial by ordeal, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say that most of the thought is not, oh, hey, you know, I made it. It's more like, am I going to survive this thing? And then after the fact is when you can kind of take stock of its meaning and what it gives you in your life and so forth. The the process itself is maybe not the most fun thing you ever did in your life.
It's rigorous. It's rigorous. I
Yeah.
remember because I actually went through it. I want to say a year and a quarter ago, right before my daughter was born, and you know, it was profound. But like you said, it's rigorous. It's trial by error. You just got to hang on for dear life. And, you know, but I tell you, once you make it through and you're accepted by the brothers and there's that fraternity, it's one of the most beautiful things.
Yes.
And
that
I appreciate
is
it.
for sure.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
That is for sure. That the fraternity and it literally is a source of life, of 𝘃cie, of life-fulfilling energy. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing once you've completed it.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I tell you, you know, it was a beautiful energy to align with, and I ask you after now that you're aligned with Ayan and you're delving probably deeper even into your studies, and now you're starting to see this proficiency take place. You know, how did life change for you after the juramento? What things did you notice within yourself now that you were licensed? You know.
I think it's like anything. What if we said that being sworn is the equivalent of getting like your advanced degree in something? You know, like it's one thing to be a medical student, and then it's another thing to actually become a doctor. Like now you're an official, actual doctor. So I think when you receive your advanced degree, all it does is deepen your commitment to the thing that you got your degree in. So once you pass the bar and you become a lawyer, that just further deepens your commitment to the study of the law, even though when you were studying law, you as a student, you felt very committed, but it's another level of commitment after you're sworn.
That's beautiful, and I definitely feel that. Even though I haven't reached that level of proficiency in the drum, just being able to, you know, receive my 𝘃𝗵𝗃𝗍 as a 𝗵𝗨, being able to, you know, do things autonomously, it gives a great deal of satisfaction, especially when you see your elders saying, "Hey, good job there. Hey, that was solid." You know, it's really beautiful, and
I'll show you.
Before my next question, Mike, I want to relay a pataki to you because it's one that, you know, after I got sworn in, I really delved into the literature behind Nanya within Ifa because they are two deities that are so intertwined. And I think sometimes it gets lost in context, you know, because some of this information isn't out there. But there's a beautiful story that speaks of when Olodumare commissioned a gentleman named Osaing in conjunction with Ogun to construct an instrument or a tool that was going to facilitate communication between the both of them, right? So they did that. You know, Ogun with his tools, Osaing obviously gave the tree, whichever one of the many ones that are used to confection it, and he constructed ultimately 4 of them, but, you know, the 4th one has its purpose, and they were going to play 3. So he called on his friends, right? He called on his friend the elephant, who was going to play the okonkolo because he felt that it befitted his, you know, profile more. And then he also called on his brother the antelope to play 𝗃𝗏𝗃 because he felt like it kind of assimilated him better. And Osaing was going to sit in the middle, right? And they started playing. And, you know, by way of this unison, it got the attention of a gentleman named Shango, who we all know. And Shango, when he heard the rhythm, he came running. And he took all 3 drums from these gentlemen and said, you know, I'm going to start playing. And he started playing all 3 drums at once, to the amazement, obviously, of the people he took the drum from. So he looked at all of them and he said, hey, you know, I'm not trying to bully you guys, but these are mine now. So if I need you, I'll call on you. And the elephant and the antelope were greatly offended. They said, we won't call on, we're not coming if you call us. And Osaing said, well, Shango, we're going to have to make a pact here because my guys don't want to work with you, but, you know, things need to happen. So Shango and Osaing made the pact, and then the elephant and the antelope said, hey, we'll come whenever you call us, right? And it's a really beautiful pataki that's in the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍, right? I mention all these different things because obviously you've fluctuated between all 3 of these. I remember the first time I saw you were playing 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍 beautifully. I remember when I got sworn in, and this is obviously very brief, but when you're behind that thing, you know, and you're hearing that bass and you're putting your hands on it and you're feeling that vibration and what I like to characterize as that heat, you know, what are some of the things you're feeling when you're behind the middle? You know, and you're kind of fluctuating there. What are some of not only emotions but feelings, you know, symptoms, anything like that? What's it like back there at your level?
I think 2 things were, you know, so One, yes, is power, because you are really controlling the room. The room is in your charge. Yes, the 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏, the singer, is in charge, of course, but the person playing 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏 is kind of in charge of the energy in the room.
Definitely.
The 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏 is calling, but the energy, you're constructing the energy, hopefully in a very uh, kind of a logical and with a lot of forethought and a lot of care. So there's kind of the power of that chair, I guess, like flying a plane. Yeah, you got a bunch of instruments that you can rely on, but you're flying that plane. And therefore, then the responsibility that the calling 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏, bringing Orisha. Yeah, again, the 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏 obviously is the one sort of doing the calling, but in conjunction with you as the 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏. And that means you have a great deal of responsibility, and you have to be willing to accept that. You have to be willing to embrace that, and you have to be then willing to take that on for everybody that's in the room. You're kind of in charge, so people have to trust you, and they have to trust that you're there for them, not for your ego, and not for your own personal sort of look at me, look at me, look at me. So I think those are the things that kind of go through my head.
And I can understand that completely, because it's like you said, everyone is in your care, because even though obviously the 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏, the song is important, the verb is important, even when you go from the very beginning of the drumming, the drum is the one that speaks first, and ultimately the
Yep,
one that speaks last, even with the closing,
that's
So
correct. That's
you
correct.
really control the ambiance of that room, and if obviously if you're not in unison, then everything kind of goes out of whack.
Yeah,
It's the basis.
and the message to 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏 is being transmitted through Ayan. I mean, the singer, again, it's both, right? I don't want to diminish in any way the role of the singer, because sometimes I'm the singer, so I don't want to diminish my own role.
Yeah, right.
But
Damn, Mike, you said this, right? No, we're good.
right, yeah, right, exactly. But Ayan is delivering the message to 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏. If we're presenting a 𝗃𝗏𝗏, if we're playing for Egun, it is Ayan that is delivering the message. So the director of Ayan, that's a pretty darn important and responsible chair. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, because it's your face. Especially the drum is yours. You're over there in the middle. People are looking at you like, Mike, what happened there? Or Mike, that was wonderful.
Yep,
All the
that's
glory and all the
correct.
spoils, or all the responsibilities. So
That's
it
correct.
makes
You
perfect
receive,
sense.
yeah, you receive all the ire, you also receive all the osobo.
Yeah, yeah, and it can come real quick if the drum is not
Yeah.
rocking. You know.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I tell you, it is interesting, because we're talking about this gentleman Osang, right? And Osang is an interesting character, because you hear the brothers in the drum, they talk about, man, Anya is addicting, right? And
Oh yeah.
it's easy to see why, because you have a beautiful music. It's like you said, there is that power, there is that fraternity. It's a beautiful equation, but there's actually a pataki that speaks of that addiction, right? Or how when things aren't maneuvered accordingly, you can get trapped in the drum, right? Even though to the untrained ear, it's like, why wouldn't I want to get trapped to it? But when we look at the 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 or 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏, it speaks of when 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃's son wanted to be a drummer, right? And he was very fantastic at it. He was really talented. But 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 had explained to his son, I'm not trying to interrupt your ambitions, but you have to go through your proper processes. You have to visit Orula, go through your hand of Ifa process. Establish yourself, because it's not that everything isn't the drum, but at the same time, the drum isn't everything. Even if you're gonna live off of it and dedicate your life to it, you have to protect yourself and make sure you're in line and in frequency with her. Of course, he did not listen, like most adolescent men don't to their dads, right? And he went to the drum. But he didn't realize that some of the brothers there, based on how good he was, didn't have the best intentions for him. And he actually became a slave to that specific set, right? Why do I bring this pataki up? I bring it up because obviously the amount of hours you have to put in, not only to memorize these rhythms, but the timing and the cadence. Even though it might have been a healthy obsession, when you're really growing and becoming proficient, did you become, constructively addictive to this beautiful instrument?
Yeah, and yes, it's fair to say, I think it's fair to say that it's a positive addiction, but it is an addiction. It almost has to take over your life if you're not born into it. If you come out of your mother's womb in Matanzas and it's all around you, maybe you don't have to study that hard because it's just a part of your life. But if you're in Aleyo, if you're a foreigner, doesn't matter whether you're Yuma, you don't have to be American. You could be, German, French, Mexican, Japanese, doesn't matter. If you're going to learn it correctly, it has to become an addiction. And no addiction is all healthy. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
So again, if you do this, you will sacrifice. My padrino used to say, "Añá es sacrificio," and would never say "Añá is, alegría," or, vamos a disfrutar. Añá es sacrificio.
Yeah.
And then to own a set of drums is even more sacrificio, because then you're the caretaker. And it's one thing to play them, and it's another thing to take care of them and own them and be responsible for them. So the addiction is, like everything in life, is two-sided. It's not a one-sided addiction by any means.
And obviously you taking it so seriously and dedicating yourself to this, how long did you wait before you pulled out your own set, at least the first one?
Well, I never asked for my first set. My teacher in Cuba sent me a letter back in the day when there were no telephones.
Wow.
I'm not being fun. Well, my first, how do I put this? There were telephones in Cuba, but there were like one phone per block. So you couldn't call somebody in Cuba.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was the old thing of they would write a letter and then they would give it to somebody who was traveling to somewhere outside of the country, meaning if they knew somebody maybe that at some point was going to Spain or Mexico, and then that person would send it to their kid who lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who would put it in the mail to you. So it was the old Wells Fargo Pony Express thing.
I would have used the pigeon personally.
Well, yeah, except that in this case, except that the distance is too great, right?
Oh, good Lord, yeah, of course.
So, and my teacher in Matanzas was arguably the most famous percussionist in Cuban history, maybe.
His name?
One of. His name was Esteban Vega Bacallao, más conocido por 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃.
Oh, wow.
He was the quinto player for the Muñequitos de Matanzas,
Oh wow.
or actually for the Huahuancó Matancero,
Yeah.
and the acknowledged Bata master of his generation, at least specifically in Matanzas, because there were other guys in Havana, of course.
No, gentleman drummer, definitely.
But he was the guy. So I'm in my house and I get this letter 6 months later after he wrote it saying, I've made your drums, come get them.
Oh Lord.
And I'm like, what do you mean you made my, what are you talking about? I didn't even know what he was talking about. I never asked him to make me drums.
Yeah.
I never went there and said, oye, 𝘃𝗂𝗃𝗃, mira, estoy pensando que necesito un juego. No, I never said a word about that. I didn't have 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 made yet. The last thing in the world that would have ever occurred to me is that I should ask for a set of fundamento. And he sends me this letter saying, okay, they're here, you got to come get them. And I wrote him back and said, I'm not getting fundamento. I wouldn't even know how to take care of them. I don't have 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗏. What are you talking about? And he wrote me back and he said, if you don't come get these drums, don't ever come back to my house.
Oh God. Talk about motivation.
Yeah. So I went and got him. I mean, we had to birth them. You know, he had the shells made and everything, but then we had to birth them and so forth and so on. You know, as you know, that's quite a process.
Oh yeah.
And so I had, well, and then again, so now if you have a set of fundamento, how do you not make your 𝘃𝗃𝗃? So 2 years later, I made my 𝘃𝗃𝗃. And then several years after that, my padrino in 𝘃𝗃𝗃 passed away. And he was a famous tambolero in La Habana. And he had 2 sets of drums. And so he gave one to my 𝗃𝗏𝗏 in Santos, and he gave one to me. So then now I have 2 sets of fundamento, one from Matanzas and one from La Habana. So my addiction has turned into quite a responsibility.
And your padrino's name was, Mike?
Regino Jimenez Sáez, most better known as 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗏𝗃, but he was a disciple of Jesus Perez, and he became the dueño, if you will, of Jesus Perez's drums when Jesus Perez passed away. So I'm a student, disciple, if you will, of both 𝘃𝗃𝗃 in Matanzas and Regino in La Habana.
Mike, I mean, that's pretty. Those are some pretty big names for somebody from St. Louis, man. And
yeah.
Destiny is incredible, because I know for a fact how selective, or at least I have heard how selective, at least 𝘃𝗃𝗃 was, especially taking people on, and then to get a drum out of anybody over there, let alone him. You really went through that classic process, and it really, speaks volumes about you and what they recognized in you and the dedication you put into this beautiful Orisha. I have to ask you then, being around all these celebrated men, legendary men, apart from the music, what's the greatest lesson you learned from them outside of that?
Wow. I'd like to pause for a very long time, but because it's a podcast, I won't, to think about the answer. But I think I'm going to say humility. I'm
Beautiful.
sure there are people who would say that I have no humility of any kind.
Yeah, but whatever.
And I'm just, completely, mentiroso. But humility, responsibility to 𝘃𝗃𝗃, responsibility to Ayan, responsibility to maintaining a tradition that now in the modern world is being changed, transformed, I would argue corrupted. Who am I to say that? I don't know. I'm nobody. But, and so to this day, I make every effort to do things the way that I was taught by those two gentlemen, which puts me actually out of step with the modern world and out of alignment, if you will, with the way people do things now. So I've become the crotchety old man that the younger generation goes, yeah, that old guy, he's old and cranky. He doesn't really understand how things are.
Mike, I got to touch on your guardian angel after hearing that, because if there's anybody that was old and crotchety, it was Baba, right? It was 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲.
Of course.
And it's, I remember you just told me this before we started, and as soon as you told me you were a son of 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲, I said, this is incredible because it just makes so much sense because, when you think of the drum now, who does everybody talk about? They're talking about 𝗀𝗄, they're talking about Osang. No one talks about 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲, and 𝗿𝗲𝗍, scripture says, was the first owner of a lot of things, but one of them was the drums of Bata, right? And what happened was 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 was the owner of the Bata drums, and he had a son named 𝗀𝗄 and a son named 𝗿𝗲𝗄𝗏. And 𝗀𝗄 was always trying to get the drums from his father, right? But 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 realized that his son was spoiled. He didn't do well in his studies, and he knew if he gave him the drum, he was going to drop out and just completely focus on that, right? So he told him no. And 𝗀𝗄 was very spoiled, and he just went on the corner and started crying outside of the castle. So his brother comes up and says, bro, why are you crying? He said, our dad won't give me the drums, and I can't live. I'm going to die. I'm going to jump off of a cliff. And 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 said, don't worry, we're going to get the drums. Relax. He said, no, you don't understand. When dad says he's not going to give me some, he's not going to give it to me. He said, we're going to make them. They waited for 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 to leave the house, right? And then 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 snuck in with his brother, and they covered the drum in red palm oil. This is in the 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗃𝗍𝗲. And when 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 came home, he saw the drums covered in red palm oil, and obviously that was a huge taboo for him. He literally threw the drums out of the window, right? And to protect the drum, because 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗃 speaks of why Ayan can't touch the ground, 𝗀𝗄 and 𝗿𝗲𝗄𝗏 caught the drums and ran away from him. And when 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 looked out the window and saw that he had been duped, he said, these kids, man, I can't deal with them. Just let them have it, because hasta cuándo, So, a couple things, are spoken of in this Odu. It speaks of why 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 ended up leaving Bata and getting into the drums of 𝗃𝗍𝗃, which are popular in Africa. Why, the brother tamboreros put the red palm oil on their hands sometimes to play. All of these different elements, right? But it's interesting the point you make. 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗲 was so jealous with the drum and it being handled correctly and in sane and humble hands. What advice would you give to any of these young guys who are thinking about or starting to learn Ayan and Bata, or even the guys that are already in that are trying to preserve this tradition and this instrument?
Well, notice how your question ended with trying to preserve this tradition. I think that in any walk of life, many elders will say that the youngers are not trying to preserve the tradition. They're trying to just modernize it and do their own thing. So if the younger person is in fact interested in preserving the tradition, which I wonder about these days, I would say to them that they need to do their homework and their research, meaning they need to go back, learn how things were 80 years ago, and then 60 years ago, and then 40 years ago, and then 20 years ago. How did things get played? How did things get prayed? How did things learn how it was, and then how it developed, so that you don't think that what they do today is necessarily what you're supposed to do. or is the best way to do it. So, you know, I'm a professional musician as a career, and it's the same thing, right? Learn how it was first before you try to play modern. How do you know how modern happened if you don't know how the past was? So same thing here, and then spend as much time as you can with the elders, even if that time is what you think wasted time, meaning, but I'm not being taught something, or we're not playing, or we're not, you know, we're just sitting around having lunch maybe. But it's when you sit with the elders that they tell you the story, the equivalent of the pataquis. I mean, today you've given 4 or 5 pataquis, but it doesn't even have to be a pataki, right? The elder guy might say, you know, I was playing the tambor for Ochun one day, and this is what happened, or you know, that's when so and so sang this, so we created this tambor, this 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, I mean, because blah blah blah. All of your history, all of your collective knowledge, all of the traditional information is in the memories and the brains of the mayores, not written down in a book, not, I mean, not on some YouTube video, not in a podcast with Joe and Mike.
Yes,
No. It's with the mayores. So every minute that you can spend, and not only spend with them, but in service to them. Pick them up, take them to the drugstore if they need their prescription filled. I don't know, cook them dinner. You know, be in service to your elders, and in turn, that's how you will learn the really profound things that you need to know to learn about and preserve the tradition.
Mike, that's awesome, man. And I think the greatest things I've ever learned weren't from a book. And, you know, we tell our viewers all the time, this is great. The podcast is beautiful. We relay a lot of great information, but none of it will ever compare to what you will learn with your elders. That love, that sense of filial loyalty. You know, the greatest pataquis I ever learned were just hearing the old guys talk, you know, after a couple, you know, cañangas and, you know, hey, you know, a little rumba, and they're just talking, and you're just sucking it all in. So I think that's beautiful. And it reminds me of the samurais, man. You know, people would, you know, go to war to be able to serve the master tea. You know, they'd go to war to see who was going to sharpen the master's blade. You know, who's going to carry the drum for, you know, Baba, who's, you know, those kind of things. It's so beautiful when it's healthy and when it's reciprocated, and you're from a time where, you know, that really was still happening, and you're keeping that alive just with this conversation, because it really starts here. Because unfortunately, maybe that young guy saw something ulterior, and then hearing you, he's like, well, maybe I should dig a little bit more. You know, maybe there is something, maybe there was a life, maybe there were people before I was born, you know, because some people are even like, was there anybody before I was born? Was there anything? You know what I'm saying? So that's beautiful, and it resonates with me, because in my first steps in Ifa, you know, you pick up the mop, you know, you carry the rooster, you know, at first glance, you're like, man, I'm a slave, but that's where you get that respect. That's where you get that consideration. And, you know, the student of today is the teacher of tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, and you are a slave. That's correct.
Adibo.
And
yeah.
you have to learn to embrace that.
Yeah. Well, it's like Orula said, it's better to be the slave of 𝗿𝗏𝗻𝗏 than the king of man. So as long as you're going through your apprenticeship, and as long as you're just to be around, just to be invited, and I'm sure you could say this, but I've heard the old guys say it, oye, just to be invited to a misa, to an Ifa, to play at a drumming. This was, you know, you know, you're taken aback by it, because you don't have to be invited. You don't have to be in the plans. You know what I'm saying? And just to be there is an honor. And whatever comes after that is greatly appreciated, you know? So
all true.
Mike, I have to say, you know, there's various odus, you know, Turarico speaks of when Shango would play the drum and people applauded him and he felt great doing it. Iroso Gang was where he played the drum and became king. I mean, you've played, how many, set amount of drummings over decades, I get into numbers, but I ask you, before we bring things full circle, what has the feeling been like over a career that spans decades to play this instrument, bring joy, and see the positive effect it's had on a community? What has that been like?
Well, it's obviously a lot. You feel like it was a life well lived.
Nice.
You feel like you you had a life that was self-fulfilling and therefore in turn communally fulfilling. And I don't think we are selfless beings. I'm not Gandhi. I'm not no, you know what I mean? In
We're
other
not
words,
Obadala, we're not Orula, we're just man, just humble man.
we're just yeah, and so I think we want to be fulfilled. We want to feel the positive energy of a life well lived. So I think it's both. I feel like I had a fantasy life, and in turn, if I was able in that to provide that positive emotion for other people, Moni, hey, that's great. Beautiful. Uh, so I just think the cliche of I feel so blessed, all right, what a cliche, but I do. So I'll use the cliche. I feel very blessed to have had the life that I've had.
Mike, really beautiful conversation. I love you already, brother. I mean, we've spoken voice to voice, I think less than 3 times, and you remind me of people that played such a huge role and were so impactful in my life. My elders of Ifa, the people I've been able to experience within this, even going all the way back to being a young boy in Miami. I want to thank you so much, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk about some of the things you may have going on, or just any final words you have for the Our Roots community.
Well, I want to come back to you with it. It's really been a pleasure the few times we've gotten to speak with you. And first thing we need to do is agree that whenever I get to Florida, I'm coming to Orlando to meet with you in person.
If I don't
So
go to Cali first, because I'm looking for any
there you
reason
go.
to go get out of the state.
There you go. So, we will be frente a frente soon enough. If anybody's interested in what I do or what I've done, maybe I guess I should say, no reason why you should be, but if for some reason you wanted to, you could go to 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲.com. I've lived a wonderful life as a professional musician. I have a bunch of recordings that I produced in my lifetime, a lot of folkloric recordings, but also Latin jazz and charanga and conjunto, and I published a lot of books on drumming and music. I have videos that I've done, including one that I'm incredibly proud of my madrina and my 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 family playing and singing and dancing the original rumbas from the town of Matanzas from the early 20th century that
Wow.
was nominated for a 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏 award, which is the Cuban equivalent of a Grammy.
Wow.
And so if you go to 𝗃𝗃𝗍𝗏.com, you can look at my stuff and see what I did. And so for everybody, this is not a promotional moment. It's just if for whatever reason you go, well, let me see what this guy did, go there and you can find out about me.
Mike, the only thing I ask is that Olodumare bless you May Obatala bless you. May Anya bless you. May
Muito
Mekun
poi.
bless you. May all of those
Muito poi.
ancestors that you've mentioned, may they look upon us with good eyes, and by the grace of all of them, may we be able to keep our tradition intact and keep in contact with our roots. I thank you from the most profound part of myself for this opportunity, and
Muito poi.
I think this conversation is going to have an impact on a lot of people. So I really appreciate you, brother.
And you and I agree to stay in contact, yeah?
I'm texting you. I'm texting you tomorrow.
All right. And I'll be at you, when I get back off the road in about a week, because I'm up in the thick of it. So I'll be at you when I get back home.
Word. Nah, you know how it is, man. Keep spanking the skins, brother.
All right. Cuídate y nos vemos pronto.
Sounds good. Bendición, Baba. Family, what an amazing conversation. I want to thank Mr. Spiro once again. I want to thank you guys for watching and just share a couple thoughts with you before we go ahead and disconnect. BotanicaCandlesandMore.com is up and running. We're here for you for all of your products and services that you need, whether it's consultations or mentorship programs, etc. Our membership program is up and running. We have a bunch of people joining every day, and we'd love to see you be a part of it, especially our VIP tier, so you can get the most out of us, which is what you've been asking for. The podcast is available on all major platforms, right? If you want to go ahead and visit the website or, hear us, we're everywhere. Be sure to tap on that subscribe button, like button, comment, share, and from Our Roots Podcast, until next time, see the light.